I was warming up my 2024 Toyota Camry in the driveway on a freezing February morning in Columbus, Ohio, when I noticed something strange about the woman sitting in my driver's seat. Let me back up. My name is Frank Coleman, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision for exactly 8 months when this nightmare began. I'm a 32-year-old software engineer who works from home, and I bought my modest 3-bedroom house thinking I'd finally found peace and quiet in the suburbs. What I didn't know was that the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association was run by a woman who made Stalin look reasonable. Her name was Patricia Whitmore, and she was the kind of middle-aged woman who wore her authority like armor. Blonde highlights that screamed expensive salon visits, designer athleisure, where that she definitely didn't exercise in, and a perpetual expression that suggested she just smelled something unpleasant. She was 53 years old and had been HOA president for 7 years, which should have been my first warning sign. The trouble started small, the way these things always do. First, it was a violation notice about my mailbox being the wrong shade of black. Then it was my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall on a Wednesday morning. Then, it was my recycling bin being visible from the street at 3 in the afternoon on a non-collection day. Each violation came with a $50 fine and a tersely worded letter printed on cream-colored cardstock with the HOA logo embossed at the top. I paid the fines like an idiot. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to live my life, work my remote job, and maybe grill some burgers on the weekend without someone measuring the smoke output. But Patricia Whitmore wasn't the kind of person who stopped when you gave her an inch. She was the kind who took a mile and then billed you for the privilege. The Friday before everything went to hell, I came home from grocery shopping to find a bright orange sticker on my front door. It declared in bold letters that my holiday decorations were still up past the February 1st deadline, and that I was in violation of Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws. The fine was $200. The problem was that I didn't have any holiday decorations up. I'd taken down my modest string of lights and wreath in early January. I stood there with bags of groceries, staring at this sticker, feeling my blood pressure rise. I grabbed my phone and took pictures of my completely decoration-free house, then marched inside to draft an email to Patricia. Her response came within 10 minutes. "Mr. Coleman, our records clearly show decorations were visible on your property during the February 3rd inspection. The fine stands. Additionally, please be advised that your tone in this email constitutes harassment of HOA board members. This will be noted in your file." I hadn't used any kind of tone. I'd simply stated facts and asked for the fine to be rescinded. But apparently, disagreeing with Patricia Whitmore was harassment. I should have lawyered up right then. Instead, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting and address this in person like a rational adult. That meeting was on Tuesday evening, held in the subdivision's community center, a bland building that smelled like carpet cleaner and broken dreams. About 20 homeowners were scattered across folding chairs, most of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Patricia sat at a table at the front with 2 other board members. Gary Henderson, a nervous, bald man in his 60s who clearly just agreed with whatever Patricia said, and Donna Martinez, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who spent most of the meeting checking her phone. When the floor opened for homeowner concerns, I raised my hand. Patricia's eyes locked onto me with the warmth of a shark spotting a swimmer. "Yes, Mr. Coleman." Her voice was syrupy sweet, which somehow made it worse. I stood up, keeping my voice level. "I received a violation notice and fine for holiday decorations that don't exist. I've taken photos showing my house has no decorations. I'm requesting the fine be removed and the violation be cleared from my record." Patricia smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Coleman, I personally conducted that inspection. I saw the decorations with my own eyes." "What decorations specifically did you see?" "A wreath on the door and string lights along the gutter line." "I removed those on January 7th. I have photos with timestamps." "Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Coleman?" The room went silent. This was clearly a test, a power play. If I backed down, she won. If I pushed forward, I was the troublemaker. "I'm saying there's been a mistake," I said carefully. "I'd like the board to review the evidence." "The board stands by its inspections. The fine is valid. If you continue to dispute this, we'll be forced to pursue legal action for unpaid HOA fees. Is there anything else?" I sat down, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. This wasn't about decorations or rules. This was about control. Patricia Whitmore had decided I was a problem, and she was going to make my life miserable until I either fell in line or moved away. I didn't pay the fine. Instead, I spent the next week researching Ohio HOA laws and my rights as a homeowner. I learned that HOAs have broad authority, but they're not above the law. They have to follow their own bylaws, and they have to provide due process. I drafted a formal dispute letter citing the relevant sections of our community's governing documents and sent it via certified mail. Patricia's response was to schedule a hearing before the board to discuss my pattern of violations and hostile behavior toward HOA leadership. The hearing was set for Friday, February 14th. Valentine's Day. How romantic. But none of that explains why Patricia Whitmore was sitting in my running car on the morning of February 12th. I'd gotten into the habit of starting my car with the remote key fob from inside the house. It was freezing cold that winter, and I liked having a warm car when I left for errands. The fob had a range of about 50 feet, so I could hit the button from my living room, wait 5 minutes, and walk out to a toasty vehicle. That Wednesday morning, I pressed the button on my fob while making my second cup of coffee. I heard the familiar beep-beep of the car starting, saw the lights flash through the window. Perfect. I finished my coffee, grabbed my wallet and keys, and headed out the front door. That's when I saw her. Patricia Whitmore was sitting in my driver's seat with the door closed, both hands on my steering wheel, staring straight ahead like she was posing for a driver's license photo. For a solid 5 seconds, I just stood there on my porch, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Then the confusion turned to anger, hot and sudden. I marched down my driveway. Patricia's head turned slightly as I approached, but she didn't get out of the car. She didn't even look particularly concerned about being caught. I yanked open the driver's side door. "What the hell are you doing in my car?" Patricia looked at me with that same condescending smile from the meeting. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman. I'm conducting an inspection." "An inspection? You're sitting in my car." Section 15.2 of the HOA bylaws grants the board authority to inspect any vehicle regularly parked in the subdivision to ensure compliance with community standards. That doesn't give you the right to sit inside my car. Get out. She made no move to leave. "I'm not finished with my inspection. Your vehicle's interior appears to violate several cleanliness standards." I looked past her into my car. It was perfectly clean. I'd vacuumed it 2 days ago. There wasn't so much as a receipt on the floor. "There's nothing wrong with my car. Get out now or I'm calling the police. If you threaten me again, I'll have no choice but to file for a restraining order. I'm simply performing my duties as HOA president." She was still sitting there, hands on my steering wheel in my running car, acting like this was completely normal. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Patricia finally moved, unbuckling the seatbelt I hadn't noticed she'd fastened and stepping out of my car with deliberate slowness. She smoothed down her expensive yoga pants and adjusted her North Face jacket. "This hostility is exactly what I'll be discussing at Friday's hearing," she said. "Your behavior is becoming a serious concern for the safety and well-being of this community." The 911 operator answered. "911, what's your emergency?" "I just found someone sitting in my car without permission," I said, keeping my eyes on Patricia. "Is the person still there?" "Yes, she just got out. She's the president of my HOA. She claims she was doing an inspection." Patricia's expression shifted slightly. Maybe she was realizing this looked bad, or maybe she was just annoyed at the inconvenience. "Can you stay on the line, sir? I'm dispatching an officer to your location." "Yes, I'll stay on the line." Patricia shook her head like I was being childish. "I hope you realize how much worse you're making this for yourself. Filing false police reports is a crime, Mr. Coleman." She turned and walked toward her own house 3 doors down, her stride confident and unhurried. I stood there in my driveway, phone pressed to my ear, watching her go. The operator asked me to confirm my address. I gave it, along with a description of Patricia and her address. The operator assured me an officer would arrive within 15 minutes. I sat down on my porch steps, my car still running in the driveway, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. How did she get in my car? The doors had been locked. They locked automatically when I used the remote start. I was sure of it. Then a worse thought occurred to me. I went back to my car and checked the center console where I usually kept my spare key fob. It was gone. I kept a spare there for emergencies, tucked in a small compartment. Now the compartment was empty. My stomach dropped. When had she taken it? The car had been locked in my garage overnight. I'd parked it in the driveway yesterday afternoon while I cleaned out the garage, but I'd been home the whole time, unless she'd taken it before yesterday. But when? I thought back over the past few weeks. There had been a neighborhood emergency meeting about a supposed break-in 2 weeks ago. We'd all gathered in the community center for Patricia to dramatically announce that someone had reported a suspicious person in the neighborhood. She'd encouraged everyone to check their homes and vehicles. I'd walked around my property, found nothing amiss, and forgotten about it. Had she used that as cover to steal my key fob? The police cruiser arrived 12 minutes later. Officer Jake Morrison was in his mid-30s, with the patient expression of someone who dealt with plenty of neighborhood disputes. He took my statement while standing in my driveway, writing notes in a small notebook. "So you're saying she was just sitting in your driver's seat when you came outside?" "Yes, the car was running. I'd started it with my remote key fob from inside the house." "And you didn't give her permission to be in the vehicle?" "Absolutely not." "And I just discovered my spare key fob is missing from the center console. I think she stole it." Officer Morrison's eyebrows went up slightly. "That's a serious accusation. When did you last see the spare key?" "I'm honestly not sure. I don't use it regularly, but it's always kept in that console. And now it's gone, right after I find her sitting in my car." "Did you see her with a key or fob?" "No, but how else would she have gotten in?" "The car locks automatically with the remote start." Officer Morrison nodded slowly. "I'll need to speak with her. Can you show me exactly where she lives?" I pointed to Patricia's house, a large colonial with perfectly manicured landscaping even in February. We walked over together. Officer Morrison rang the doorbell. Patricia answered almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Good morning, officer. I assume Mr. Coleman called you. I hope he's not wasting too much of your time with his harassment campaign." Officer Morrison's expression didn't change. "Madam, I need to ask you some questions. Mr. Coleman states he found you sitting in his vehicle this morning without permission. Is that accurate? I was conducting an HOA inspection. It's well within my authority as board president. Did you have Mr. Coleman's permission to enter his vehicle? The HOA bylaws grant me inspection authority. That's not what I asked, madam. Did you have his specific permission to sit in his car this morning? Patricia's smile tightened. I don't need his permission. The bylaws are very clear. Madam, HOA bylaws don't override property rights or Ohio law. Entering someone's vehicle without permission can constitute criminal trespass. How did you access the vehicle? The door was unlocked. Mr. Coleman states the vehicle locks automatically when started with the remote. He also reports that a spare key fob is missing from inside the vehicle. Do you have his key fob? Of course not. That's absurd. Would you consent to a search of your person and home? Patricia's expression finally cracked. Absolutely not. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. She stepped back and closed the door in Officer Morrison's face. The officer turned to me. I can't search without consent or a warrant. But I am going to write up a report. I'd recommend you document everything. Change your locks if you think she has access to your house, and consider filing for a restraining order if this behavior continues. What about the stolen key fob? Without proof she took it, I can't arrest her. But if you want to pursue charges for trespass, you can file a report at the station and the prosecutor will review it. I'd also recommend installing security cameras if you haven't already. I thanked Officer Morrison and watched him return to his cruiser. He drove down to Patricia's house and spoke to her for another 10 minutes through her now open front door. I couldn't hear what was said, but Patricia's body language was defensive, arms crossed, chin up. Eventually, the officer left and Patricia retreated inside her house. I went back inside my own home and immediately ordered a security camera system online with expedited shipping. Then I called a locksmith and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon to change all my locks. I wasn't taking any chances. The locksmith, a guy named Pete who'd seen everything in his 20 years of business, showed up at 2 o'clock. While he worked on my front and back doors, I told him the whole story. He shook his head. HOA man, I've seen some crazy stuff, but that takes the cake. You should definitely get cameras, and maybe park in your garage for a while. I've been parking in the garage at night, but I can't fit both cars in there. I was suddenly very aware of how vulnerable my property was. Get the cameras up first. Then at least you'll have evidence if she tries anything else. The cameras arrived the next morning via same-day delivery. I spent Thursday afternoon installing them, one covering the driveway, one covering the front door, one covering the backyard, and one covering the garage. They connected to my phone via an app that would send me alerts for any motion detection. By Thursday evening, my house was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Friday morning, the day of the HOA hearing, I woke up to 3 motion alerts on my phone. I checked the footage with a sense of dread. Sure enough, Patricia had been on my property. The timestamps showed her walking up my driveway at 6:15 in the morning, checking my mailbox, walking around to the side of my house, and peering in my windows. All of it captured in crisp, high-definition video. I saved the footage to 3 different locations and sent a copy to my email. Then I got ready for work, which consisted of walking to my home office and opening my laptop. I had a hard time concentrating on code. The hearing was scheduled for 7 that evening, and I had no idea what to expect. At 6:45, I walked over to the community center. A dozen other homeowners were already there, including a few I'd spoken with casually at neighborhood barbecues. They gave me sympathetic looks. Apparently, word had spread about the car incident. Patricia was already seated at the front table with Gary and Donna. She looked immaculate as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my car payment. When I walked in, her eyes locked onto me with unconcealed hostility. "Mr. Coleman, thank you for joining us," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "Please take a seat. We'll begin shortly." I sat in the front row, my phone in my pocket with the camera footage queued up and ready. I'd also brought printed copies of the video stills showing Patricia on my property that morning. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. She went through standard business first, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing the community budget, addressing a request to paint a front door navy blue instead of black. Everything was conducted with the same authoritarian efficiency. Then she got to me. "Now we come to the matter of Mr. Frank Coleman, resident of 847 Maple Drive. Mr. Coleman has been the subject of multiple violations and has shown a pattern of hostile and aggressive behavior toward HOA leadership. Tonight, we'll be discussing appropriate consequences for this behavior, up to and including suspension of community privileges and potential legal action." I raised my hand. Patricia ignored me and continued. "Mr. Coleman has disputed legitimate violation notices, sent harassing emails to board members, and most recently called the police on me while I was performing my duties as HOA president. This behavior is unacceptable and creates a hostile environment for the entire community." "I'd like to speak," I said, not waiting for permission. Patricia's jaw tightened. "You'll have a chance to respond after we've presented all the evidence." "What evidence? You're just making accusations." "Mr. Coleman, if you can't remain civil, we'll have to ask you to leave and make our decision without your input." A man in the back row stood up. I recognized him as David Chen, an attorney who lived 2 streets over. "Patricia, this isn't how hearings are supposed to work. You need to give Mr. Coleman a chance to speak and present his side. Otherwise, this whole proceeding is invalid." Patricia's face flushed slightly. "This is an HOA hearing, not a court of law. Actually, the bylaws you're so fond of citing require basic due process. That includes allowing the accused party to present a defense. I've read the governing documents." There was a murmur of agreement from other homeowners. Patricia looked like she'd swallowed something sour. "Fine. Mr. Coleman, you may present your defense." I stood up, pulling out my phone and the printed photos. I'd like to start by addressing the alleged violations. The first was for holiday decorations that didn't exist. I removed all decorations on January 7th, 4 days after Christmas, and weeks before the cited violation date. I have time-stamped photos proving this. I held up the photos. The violation was false. "I saw the decorations myself," Patricia insisted. "Then you were looking at the wrong house because mine had no decorations." I pulled out the next set of photos. "This morning at 6:15, you were captured on my security cameras trespassing on my property, checking my mailbox and looking in my windows. This is after you were found sitting in my car 2 days ago without permission, after stealing my spare key fob." The room erupted in murmurs. Gary looked shocked. Donna was staring at Patricia with wide eyes. Patricia's face had gone from pink to red. "That's not trespassing, that's an inspection," Patricia said, her voice rising. "And I didn't steal anything." Walking around someone's property at 6 in the morning and peering in their windows isn't an inspection, it's stalking. And the timing is pretty convenient. My spare key fob goes missing, and then I find you sitting in my locked car. How did you get in, Patricia? The door was unlocked. The car locks automatically when started with the remote. The only way you could have gotten in is with a key fob. My missing key fob. David Chen spoke up again. Patricia, do you have Mr. Coleman's key fob? No, I do not. Then you won't mind showing us your pockets and purse. I'm not subjecting myself to a search. This is ridiculous. If you have nothing to hide, it should be simple enough, David pressed. Several other homeowners voiced agreement. Patricia stood up abruptly. This hearing is over. The board will make its decision and notify Mr. Coleman in writing. This meeting is adjourned. She grabbed her leather bag and strode toward the exit. Patricia, you can't just end the meeting like that, Gary said, finding his voice for apparently the first time in years. But she was already gone, the door slamming behind her. The community center descended into chaos, everyone talking at once. David Chen came over to me. You should file a police report about this morning's trespassing. You have video evidence, and I'd recommend getting a restraining order. I can refer you to a good attorney who handles this kind of thing. You think it'll go that far? I think Patricia Whitmore is used to getting her way, and you've challenged her authority. People like that don't back down easily. Cover yourself legally. I thanked him and headed home, my mind racing. When I got back, I immediately transferred the morning's security footage to a USB drive and prepared to file another police report. But first, I wanted to check if Patricia had tried anything while I was at the hearing. I pulled up the security app on my phone. There were 2 new motion alerts, both from 20 minutes ago. I opened the first one and felt my blood run cold. The footage showed Patricia walking up my driveway with purpose. She was carrying something in her hand. It looked like a key. My house key. She walked right up to my front door and tried to unlock it. When the new lock didn't work with whatever key she had, she tried for almost a minute, jiggling the handle, before finally giving up and walking away. The second alert showed her leaving. She had a key to my house. Or at least, she'd had a key to my old locks. How long had she had it? How many times had she been in my house? I felt violated in a way I'd never experienced before. This woman had been entering my home, going through my things. The thought made my skin crawl. I sat down on my couch, trying to steady my breathing. Then I called the non-emergency police line and requested an officer come take another report. This time, Officer Sarah Bennett responded. She was younger than Officer Morrison, probably late 20s, with sharp eyes that didn't miss much. I showed her all the security footage. Patricia on my property that morning, Patricia attempting to unlock my door that evening. And you changed your locks when? She asked. Yesterday afternoon. That's clearly not the current key she's using because it didn't work. But she definitely has a key that used to work on my locks. Did you ever give her a key? Never. I've never given anyone in the HOA a key to my house. Officer Bennett made detailed notes. This is escalating. The car incident, the morning trespassing, now attempting to enter your home. I'm going to strongly recommend you file for a protection order. This kind of behavior usually doesn't stop on its own. What about the stolen key fob? And apparently a stolen house key. The problem with property theft is proving who took it and when. But the trespassing and attempted entry we have on video. That's solid. I'm going to go talk to Miss Whitmore now. I gave Officer Bennett Patricia's address and watched from my doorway as she walked down to Patricia's house. She rang the bell multiple times, but no one answered. Patricia's car was in the driveway, lights on inside the house, but she refused to come to the door. After 10 minutes, Officer Bennett returned. She's not answering. I'm going to include that in my report. We'll be in touch about next steps. In the meantime, I'd recommend filing for that protection order first thing Monday morning. The courthouse opens at 8. After Officer Bennett left, I sat in my living room with all the lights on, feeling like a prisoner in my own home. I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop and started reading through them carefully. David Chen was right. Nowhere did the bylaws grant Patricia the right to enter vehicles or homes without permission. Nowhere did they authorize inspections of interior spaces. The inspection clause she kept citing applied only to exterior visible features like paint colors, lawn conditions, and roof materials. Patricia had been lying. She'd been using the HOA as cover for what amounted to stalking and harassment. But why? What had I done to warrant this level of obsession? I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak of the house settling made me jump. I kept my phone next to the bed with the security app open, checking it obsessively. Around 3 in the morning, I got a motion alert. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding. The footage showed a possum waddling across my driveway. I almost laughed with relief. Saturday morning, I woke up exhausted and anxious. I made coffee and checked all the security footage from overnight. Nothing besides the possum. I was reviewing the footage from Friday evening again, watching Patricia try my door handle over and over, when I noticed something. When she finally gave up and turned away, her purse had fallen open slightly. Something small and black tumbled out onto my doorstep. She didn't notice, just kept walking. I set my coffee down and pulled up the footage on my computer for a better view. I zoomed in and enhanced the image. It was my key fob. My spare key fob had fallen out of her purse right there on my doorstep. I grabbed a plastic bag and went outside. Sure enough, there it was, sitting next to my welcome mat. I used the bag to pick it up, preserving any fingerprints, and brought it inside. Then I called the police station and asked for Officer Morrison or Officer Bennett. Officer Morrison called me back within an hour. I explained what I'd found and how the security footage showed it falling from Patricia's purse. He sounded energized. That's the proof we needed. I'll be right over to collect it as evidence. Don't touch it with your bare hands. Officer Morrison arrived 30 minutes later with Officer Bennett. I showed them the footage and handed over the key fob, still in the plastic bag. They both watched the video several times, taking notes. "This is good," Officer Morrison said. "This is very good. We have video evidence of her in possession of your stolen property, video of her trespassing, video of her attempting to enter your home with an unauthorized key. We're going to arrest her." "Really?" "Yes. This has gone beyond a neighborhood dispute. This is criminal behavior. We'll coordinate with the prosecutor's office, but I'm confident we have enough for charges." I felt a wave of relief so intense, I almost sat down right there in my driveway. "What happens now?" "We'll go pick her up. You'll need to give a formal statement at the station. We'll also need copies of all your security footage. Can you put that together?" "Yes, absolutely. When do you need it?" "Today, if possible. I'll call you when we have her in custody." The officers left, heading toward Patricia's house. I went inside and started compiling all the security footage onto a USB drive. I included everything. Patricia in my car, Patricia on my property Thursday morning, Patricia trying my door Friday evening, and the key fob falling from her purse. I also included my earlier photos showing the absence of holiday decorations. I wanted a complete record of her harassment. 2 hours later, Officer Morrison called. "We have her in custody. She's being charged with criminal trespass, attempted burglary, and theft. She's claiming everything was HOA business, but the prosecutor isn't buying it. Can you come down to the station to give your statement? I'll be there in 20 minutes. The Columbus Police Station was a modern building downtown. I met with a detective named Lisa Washington, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who'd clearly seen every kind of crazy. I walked her through the entire timeline, from the first ridiculous violations to finding Patricia in my car to the security footage. She took detailed notes and watched all the videos. HOA disputes usually don't end up on my desk, she said. But this woman clearly has some kind of fixation on you. Do you have any idea why? Honestly, no. I moved into the neighborhood 8 months ago. I've tried to follow the rules, even the ridiculous ones. I've paid my HOA dues. The only thing I can think of is that I challenged her authority by disputing that fake violation, and she couldn't handle it. Detective Washington nodded. Some people get drunk on power, even the small amount that comes with running an HOA. They start to believe they're above the rules they enforce on everyone else. Your security footage is excellent evidence. Very clear, time-stamped, showing a clear pattern of harassment and escalation. What happens next? She'll be arraigned, probably Monday. She can post bail if the judge allows it. There will be a preliminary hearing, and then the case will proceed from there. I'd recommend you file for a protection order Monday morning. The courthouse opens at 8, and you can file at the civil division. Given this evidence, you should have no problem getting it approved. Will that stop her? Legally, yes. If she violates a protection order, she can be arrested immediately. But I won't lie to you. Sometimes these situations get worse before they get better. Keep your security cameras running. Don't engage with her directly. If she tries to contact you, document it and report it immediately. I left the station feeling simultaneously vindicated and anxious. Patricia Whitmore was in custody, facing criminal charges, but I had a feeling this was far from over. Sunday was quiet. Too quiet. I kept checking my phone, expecting something to happen. The neighborhood felt different, like everyone was holding their breath. Around noon, I saw Gary Henderson walking past my house with his dog. He waved at me, and I went outside to talk to him. "Frank, I just want to apologize," he said, his basset hound sniffing around my mailbox. "I should have stood up to Patricia a long time ago. I knew she was out of control, but I was a coward. I didn't want to rock the boat. It's not your fault she's a criminal. Still, the board is meeting tomorrow to remove her as president. We're also going to rescind all those ridiculous fines she issued you. And we're looking into other homeowners she might have harassed. You're not the only one we're discovering. She apparently had a vendetta against anyone she perceived as questioning her authority. How many others? At least 5 we know of so far. The Martinez family 2 streets over. They were about to move because of her harassment. The Johnsons on Oak Drive. Same thing. She's been systematically bullying people for years, and those of us on the board just let it happen because it was easier than confronting her. Well, she's confronted now. Gary nodded sadly. Her husband called me this morning. He's humiliated. Says he had no idea how far she'd taken things. He's talking about divorce. Their adult kids won't even speak to her. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but only a twinge. Patricia had made choices. She decided to steal from me, harass me, and invade my privacy. Those choices had consequences. Monday morning, I was at the courthouse at 7:45. The civil division opened at 8, and I was the first person in line. I filed for a protection order, submitting copies of all my security footage and the police reports. The clerk reviewed everything and scheduled a hearing for that afternoon at 2. "This is pretty clear-cut," she said. "I'd be surprised if the judge doesn't grant this." The hearing was exactly as she predicted. Patricia appeared with a lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who tried to argue that everything was an HOA matter blown out of proportion. The judge, a stern woman named Angela Reeves, cut him off. "Counselor, your client was found in possession of the plaintiff's stolen property. She's facing criminal charges. This isn't an HOA dispute. This is stalking and harassment. Protection order granted. Miss Whitmore is to stay at least 500 feet from Mr. Coleman, his home, his vehicle, and his workplace. No direct or indirect contact. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Next case. Patricia's face was stone as she left the courtroom. Her lawyer whispered something to her, and she shook her head violently. She glanced back at me once, and the look in her eyes was pure hatred. I felt a chill run down my spine. The criminal case moved forward over the next few weeks. Patricia pled not guilty to all charges. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor, a tough woman named Rebecca Thompson, wasn't interested in going easy. Your client broke into this man's vehicle, stole his property, trespassed on his property multiple times, and attempted to break into his home. She told Patricia's lawyer during a pre-trial conference that I was allowed to observe. This isn't a slap on the wrist situation. She's looking at jail time. The trial was set for late March. In the meantime, life in Meadowbrook Heights slowly returned to something resembling normal. The HOA board elected a new president, a reasonable guy named Tom Shapiro, who actually read the bylaws and understood that HOAs were supposed to maintain property values, not terrorize residents. All my fines were rescinded. The fake violations were removed from my record. Several other homeowners came forward with their own Patricia horror stories. Mrs. Martinez told me that Patricia had been fining her for having roses that were the wrong color. Wrong color. Apparently, only red and white roses were acceptable, and Mrs. Martinez had planted pink ones. She'd paid over $1,000 in fines before finally giving up and ripping out her entire garden. The Johnsons shared that Patricia had been issuing violations for their kids' bikes being visible in the driveway. She'd called it unsightly recreational equipment. They'd been storing their kids' bikes in a rented storage unit 20 minutes away just to avoid the fines. There were dozens of stories like that. Patricia had been running the HOA like a personal fiefdom, and everyone had been too intimidated or too worn down to fight back. Until she made the mistake of targeting someone who was willing to document everything and stand their ground. The trial began on March 24th. It lasted 3 days. I testified on the first day, walking the jury through the timeline and the evidence. Patricia's lawyer tried to paint me as a troublemaker who'd overreacted to routine HOA business, but the security footage was damning. You couldn't watch a video of Patricia sitting in someone else's car without permission and call it routine. Other homeowners testified about Patricia's pattern of harassment. Detective Washington testified about the criminal aspects of the case. The stolen key fob was entered into evidence, complete with Patricia's fingerprints. Her lawyer tried to suggest that maybe I'd planted it there, but the security footage clearly showed it falling from her purse. Patricia herself didn't testify. Her lawyer probably advised against it. She sat at the defense table looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, her expensive clothes unable to hide the fact that she was a woman who'd lost all her power and didn't know how to function without it. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all charges: criminal trespass, theft, and attempted burglary. Patricia's face crumpled when the verdict was read. Her husband, sitting in the gallery, got up and left without looking at her. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Patricia remained free on bail, though she had to wear an ankle monitor. I barely thought about her anymore. The protection order was still in place. I was finally able to relax in my own home. The sentencing hearing was on April 7th. The courtroom was packed with homeowners from Meadowbrook Heights. Some were there to support Patricia, but most were there to see justice served. The judge listened to statements from both sides. Rebecca Thompson, the prosecutor, laid it out clearly. "Your Honor, Miss Whitmore used her position as HOA president to justify a sustained campaign of harassment, trespassing, and theft against Mr. Coleman. She violated his privacy, invaded his property, and stole from him. She showed no remorse at trial and continues to maintain that she did nothing wrong. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate pattern of criminal behavior. Patricia's lawyer argued for probation and community service. "Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. She's been a respected member of the community for decades." Her actions, while misguided, came from a genuine desire to maintain community standards. She's already suffered tremendously. She's lost her position, her reputation, her marriage is ending. Further punishment serves no purpose. Judge Reeves looked unimpressed. "Mr. Harris, your client broke into someone's car. She stole from him. She repeatedly trespassed on his property and tried to break into his home. The fact that she was HOA president doesn't excuse this behavior, it makes it worse. She abused a position of trust. I'm sentencing Miss Whitmore to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. She's also ordered to pay restitution to Mr. Coleman in the amount of $5,000 to cover his legal expenses, security system, and lock changes. She is permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position." Patricia let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. The bailiff led her away in handcuffs. I sat there feeling a complicated mix of relief, satisfaction, and something that might have been pity. She destroyed her own life over something so petty. Outside the courthouse, several neighbors came up to thank me. "You stood up to her when the rest of us couldn't," Mrs. Martinez said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you." David Chen shook my hand. "You did the right thing." HOAs need oversight, and people like Patricia need to learn they're not above the law. I drove home to Meadowbrook Heights, past Patricia's house with the "for sale" sign already planted in the front yard, past the community center where she'd held court over her kingdom of covenants and restrictions, and pulled into my own driveway. My car, which had started this whole mess, sat in the garage where it belonged. I went inside my house, the lock secure, the security cameras recording, and made myself a sandwich. It was over. Patricia Whitmore was going to jail. The HOA had new leadership. My record was clear. I could finally just live my life without looking over my shoulder. Tom Shapiro, the new HOA president, reached out a week later. He wanted to apologize formally on behalf of the board and discuss reforms to prevent anything like this from happening again. We met at a coffee shop off the subdivision property. "We're implementing new rules," he explained. "All HOA actions have to be approved by at least 2 board members. All violations have to be documented with photos and time-stamped evidence. Homeowners get an automatic right to appeal. And absolutely no one enters private property without explicit written permission and a valid reason. We're also hiring an independent management company to handle day-to-day operations so no single person has that much power again." "That sounds reasonable," I said. "We're also voting on whether to dissolve the HOA entirely. A lot of homeowners are fed up with the whole system after this. We might go to a voluntary neighborhood association instead, something with no enforcement power." "I'd vote for that." Tom smiled ruefully. "Yeah, I think a lot of people would. Patricia poisoned the well, so to speak. It's going to take years to rebuild trust if we even can." Life moved on. Patricia served her sentence at the Franklin County Jail, a medium-security facility where she was just another inmate in a gray uniform. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she took a plea deal for early release after 10 months, contingent on completing anger management and psychological counseling. She was released in February of the following year, almost exactly 1 year after I'd found her in my car. She didn't return to Meadowbrook Heights. Her husband had divorced her while she was incarcerated. Her house had sold. She moved to an apartment complex on the other side of Columbus where there were no HOAs, no covenants, and no one knew who she'd been. I stayed in my house in Meadowbrook Heights. The neighborhood association, now voluntary and without enforcement power, actually functioned better than the old HOA. People maintained their properties because they took pride in them, not because they feared fines. Neighbors helped each other. There were still rules about truly egregious things like leaving junk cars on blocks in the front yard, but they were enforced through social pressure and mutual respect, not authoritarian decrees and kangaroo court hearings. My security cameras stayed up, though I checked them less obsessively as time passed. The key fob incident became a neighborhood legend, the story that got told at barbecues and block parties. "Remember when Frank caught Patricia sitting in his car?" people would say, laughing in disbelief. It was funny now, in retrospect, though it hadn't been funny at the time. I never saw Patricia again after that sentencing hearing. Sometimes I wondered what she thought about now, whether she'd gained any insight into how badly she'd misused her power, or whether she still believed she'd been in the right. I hoped for her sake that she'd learned something, that the counseling had helped. But I didn't lose sleep over it either way. The whole experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, about documenting everything, and about how power can corrupt even in the smallest domains. It also taught me that most people are reasonable when you strip away the artificial authority structures and just treat each other as neighbors and equals. A year after Patricia's sentencing, I was sitting on my front porch on a Saturday morning when Mrs. Martinez walked by with her grandchildren. She'd replanted her garden with roses in every color imaginable, pink and yellow and orange and burgundy. They were beautiful. "Good morning, Frank," she called out cheerfully. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "It really is," I agreed. One of her grandkids, a little girl maybe 6 years old, pointed at my car in the driveway. "Is that the car?" she asked in a loud whisper. Mrs. Martinez laughed. "Yes, Sophia, that's the car. Did a lady really steal the keys and sit in it?" "She really did." Sophia looked at my car with wide eyes as if it were a museum piece. "That's crazy." "It was crazy," I said, "but it all worked out okay in the end." And it had. My car started reliably every morning with my remote key fob, now the only one in existence since I'd never replaced the spare. My house was secure. My neighborhood was peaceful. The HOA, or rather the Voluntary Neighborhood Association, functioned as it should have from the beginning, facilitating community without terrorizing it. Sometimes, on cold mornings, I'd stand in my living room and press the button to start my car from inside the house, watching through the window as it roared to life. And I'd think about that February morning when I'd walked outside to find Patricia Whitmore sitting in my driver's seat. It felt like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person, but the security cameras remained, silent sentinels protecting my property. The new lock stayed firmly in place. And I never, ever forgot the lesson Patricia had taught me, that the people who scream loudest about rules and order are often the ones most willing to break those rules when it suits them, and that standing up to bullies, even ones with official titles and bylaws on their side, is always worth it. The protection order remained in effect for 5 years, a legal barrier between Patricia and the life she'd tried to control. I never had to enforce it. She never came near me or my property again. As far as I knew, she'd found some kind of peace in her post-HOA life, working a quiet job somewhere and living in anonymity. I hoped she had. Not for her sake, really, but for everyone else's. One Patricia Whitmore unleashed on a neighborhood was enough. The world didn't need her finding another HOA to terrorize, another group of homeowners to bully into submission. As for me, I continued living my quiet life in Columbus, Ohio, working from home, grilling burgers on the weekend, and parking my car wherever I wanted on my own property. The grass grew to whatever length I deemed appropriate, within reason. My mailbox remained the shade of black I'd originally painted it, which was apparently a slightly different shade than the approved black in Patricia's reign of terror, but no one seemed to care anymore. The neighborhood kids started using my driveway to turn around their bikes and skateboards. I didn't mind. There were no rules against it now, and besides, it was nice to hear laughter and the sound of wheels on pavement. It felt like what a neighborhood should be: alive, human, imperfect, and free. On the 2-year anniversary of finding Patricia in my car, David Chen organized a neighborhood barbecue. It was the biggest turnout we'd ever had, dozens of families gathering in the community center park. Tom Shapiro got up to make a speech about community and resilience. He didn't mention Patricia by name, but everyone knew what he was talking about. "We learned something important these past couple years," he said. "We learned that rules should serve people, not the other way around. We learned that authority without accountability becomes tyranny, even on a small scale. And we learned that it only takes one person willing to stand up and say enough to change everything." People applauded. A few looked my way. I ducked my head, embarrassed by the attention but also grateful. Grateful that it was over. Grateful that justice had been served. Grateful that I'd had the resources and the stubbornness to see it through when others hadn't. Later, as the sun set and kids ran around with sparklers, I stood next to my car in the community center parking lot, keys in my hand. The remote start button gleamed under the streetlight. I pressed it out of habit, even though I was standing right next to the vehicle. The car beeped to life, familiar and reliable. No one was sitting in my driver's seat. No one ever would be again, at least not without my permission. It was my car in my neighborhood, in my life that I'd fought to reclaim from someone who'd thought she had the right to control it. I got in, buckled up, and drove home, the windows down, the radio playing something upbeat. 3 doors down, Patricia's old house had new owners, a young couple with twins who'd already been welcomed warmly into the neighborhood. They'd painted their front door a deep blue, a color that would have sent Patricia into apoplexy. It looked great. I pulled into my driveway, hit the button to close the garage door behind me, and went inside my home. The security footage would record nothing interesting that night. Just me coming home, just another evening in a quiet subdivision in Columbus, Ohio. Just a man living his life without fear, without harassment, without someone in authority abusing their power. And that, in the end, was all I'd ever wanted, just to live my life in peace. It had taken a stolen key fob, a woman sitting in my car, multiple police reports, a criminal trial, and 18 months of someone else's jail time to get here. But I'd made it. The HOA had stolen my car starter remote key fob. I'd found their president sitting in my running car. And I'd made sure she faced the consequences of her actions. Sometimes justice takes time, takes effort, takes documentation and persistence, and the willingness to stand up when it would be easier to back down. But when it comes, when the verdict is read and the sentence is passed, and the person who terrorized you is finally held accountable, it's worth every moment of the fight. I fell asleep that night in my own bed, in my own house, in a neighborhood that finally felt like home. The security cameras kept their silent watch. The new locks held firm. And somewhere across the city, Patricia Whitmore lived with the consequences of believing she was above the law, above common decency, above the basic human right to be left alone in your own home. The story could have ended badly. It could have escalated further. But it didn't, because the system, for all its flaws, had worked. The police had listened. The prosecutor had taken it seriously. The jury had seen through the excuses. The judge had imposed appropriate consequences. And a community had learned to govern itself with mutual respect instead of authoritarian control. That's the story of how my HOA president stole my car starter remote key fob, how I found her sitting in my running car, and how justice was eventually served. It's not the most dramatic story in the world. No one died. No one was seriously injured. But it mattered because it was about the principle that no one, not even someone with a title and a set of bylaws, has the right to violate another person's property, privacy, and peace. And every time I start my car now, whether with the button from inside my house on cold mornings or with the key in the ignition, I remember that principle. I remember that I stood up for it. And I remember that sometimes the smallest battles over the smallest things, like who has the right to sit in your car without permission, matter more than anyone realizes, until they're over and you can finally breathe easy again.